Chairman, thank you. And filibusters are popular around here, but you won't get one from me today. I think that we've got a terrific panel of witnesses. If I could make my prepared remarks a part of the record, maybe I could just highlight some of the concerns. And first, my thanks to you. Again and again, Mr. Chairman, you and Senator Franken are standing up for people who don't have power and don't have clout. The people that we're talking about today, these youngsters, the young women, for example, what they have been subjected to, in my view, is slavery, pure and simple. And they don't have any power. They don't have any clout. They don't have any political action committees. They don't have people who lobby, for them naturally, unless Libby Spears and some of these great people we've got here today can come forward. So what you and Senator Franken are doing is using this as a bully pulpit to, in effect, say to our country, on our watch, we are not going to tolerate this kind of moral blot. We are not going to tolerate sacrificing so many of our young people, particularly to these pimps. Now, you highlighted a couple of the key facts, Mr. Chairman, the question of the 100,000 children that are trafficked. I want to make the point about how much money is involved in this. We saw on Libby's terrific documentary this instance of the person flying in from around the world, coming just to take advantage of one youngster. We learned that a pimp can make $200,000 a year trafficking just one victim. And of course, the pimps traffic multiple victims at a time. So there is a huge upside, an economic bonanza for these pimps in sex trafficking. It is a multi-billion-dollar business with very little downside. The pimps have all the power. Once the girls are under their control, it is very hard for them to escape. And pimps essentially use violence to control and traumatize the young girls. Very often they move them from one city to another. One of the reasons that I got involved in this early, Mr. Chairman, is we found that up and down Interstate 5, which is our main transportation artery in Oregon, essentially there are a lot of dark areas that pimps can hide out in these kinds of areas, move the young women from city to city, and that part of Oregon, I-5, which has really been a magnet, unfortunately, for this kind of activity, is not alone. There are other parts of the country that face much the same thing. And once these young girls get involved with the pimps, the law enforcement people tell us it is almost impossible to break the grip that the pimps have on the young women, and breaking that grip is absolutely key so that, in effect, you can get to the young women the help through a kind of comprehensive, what's in effect a multidisciplinary approach that involves social services, help with law enforcement folks, and really have a full court press in the community to reduce sex trafficking. One of the principal concerns that we learned is that we desperately need shelters to give the trafficking victims a place that's safe from the pimps. This is where they can get counseling and services, and without shelters for the victims, the law enforcement authorities can't begin to get the victims to feel comfortable enough, to feel safe enough to come forward to get the kind of testimony that builds the case, busts the pimps, and get them behind bars where they belong. Now, in the whole country right now, there are only about 70 shelter beds for sex trafficking victims. Only 70 across 50 states. So the pimps are just playing the odds. I mentioned the big money that's involved, the $200,000 in one victim. The pimps know that as a result of not having these shelter beds, their victims are going to be cut loose and be unprotected pretty quickly after they've been arrested. So they know the chance of their being prosecuted for taking advantage of these girls is quite low. So we've got to turn this around. Senator Cornyn and I introduced S. 2925, the Trafficking Deterrence and Victims Support Act. So we now have bipartisan support for these efforts that Senator Franken and you both noted correctly belong with the inspiration that Paul Wellstone gave us years ago. And through this, we're going to be able to set up a number of block grant programs to test out the very best approaches that are being used in our country. These would be awarded on a competitive basis to state or local government entities that have developed models which we know, once put in place, could be copied elsewhere. Grantees would be required to create shelters where the trafficking victims would be safe from the pimps. You would get services as part of this program, mental and physical health care, treatment for substance abuse and sexual abuse, and you also provide the victims with the food, clothing, and other necessities. And hearing the stories from these young girls, we've learned that that's absolutely essential. They have not had these kind of lifeline, services. So the pimps play to the fact that they'll give them money for food and shelter, and that's part of the dependency that's created by the pimps. One last point, Mr. Chairman, because I know you want to go to the witnesses, is S2925 would address another major issue that's part of this spiral of problems that the young people face, and that's runaway children. 1/3 of runaway children are lured into prostitution within 48 hours of leaving home. And the information that we've picked up, the data indicates that kids who've run away multiple times are at the greatest risk of being drawn into prostitution. So we need to have more information and more help to those individuals, and access to that information is going to allow law enforcement authorities to see the patterns of runaway youngsters so they could help the kids that are at great risk. Finally, Mr. Chairman, let me note that we've got Ambassador Luis C. DeBaca of the State Department. It is high time that the State Department increases the visibility and the priority of this effort. And under Ambassador Sidibaka and Secretary Clinton, we are seeing that effort. They have really stepped up, and like you're doing this morning, have made this a priority for them. They're using their bully pulpit. Ambassador Sidibaka is out around the world. And on this international point, which you noted in your opening remarks, what we have picked up is that if you make a difference with an aggressive approach in our country, it will help trying to deal with the international aspect of this problem. But unfortunately, without the domestic component that we're advocating in this bipartisan legislation, the international effort doesn't reach its full potential in terms of delivering results against child prostitution. So we've got some terrific witnesses. Libby Spears delivered a real wake-up call for our country. You're going to be hearing from a number of groups, the Polaris Project, Shared Hope International, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and I think we all understand this is a chance for us on our watch to make a difference, deliver a knockout punch to these pimps, and I look forward to working with you and colleagues on both sides of the aisle to get that done.